So this is a digital scrum board that I have built using React.js. With this button you can toggle the input fields, and here we can add group members dynamically. So let's say Radostina. We can choose her. Let's create a task for her, and when you press create button, as you can see our to-do task is created. You can use drag and drop functionality in order to move the tasks, and as you can see how the background reacts to the state of the task. There are two ways of deleting tasks. The first one is just drag and drop into the trash bin, and the second one is just pressing the X button. So since I'm working with multiple components in React.js, the first thing you want to do is just open a new document and import React from React, and then if you have CSS you can import it as well. And your component is just basically a function which receives props, or to say values. And as you can see, props.member on click, and finally you have to use export default created task. And then you go to your main component and say import your component, and if you want to use it, you just have to include it with all of the props here, which will receive their values from this state here. So in order to retrieve the data from these input fields, I'm using a bunch of onChange event listeners. As you can see here, onChange, change to do. These functions here just keep track of what's changed in the HTML and set the values into these member value, to do value, definition of done value, and time value. Now I will show you how this create button works. As you can see, it created a task for us, and it has this onClick event listener which triggers submit task function. This is the submit task function. It keeps track of all of these input field values and then pushes them into the tasks array. And in order to display them individually, I'm using this for each method, which basically works like this. You target the array and it runs the code for each individual element in the array. And as you can see the result here. And here is how am I adding group members dynamically. Here I have the plus button, which triggers add member function whenever there's a click on this button. And this is the function here. I basically create a new prompt and I'm targeting members, which is this array here, and I say members that push whatever the value of this input field is. So whatever the name we put in this prompt field, it's being pushed into this array. And I'm using this event that prevent default in order to prevent the default settings and not to refresh the page, and this is to update the members array. And this is how am I displaying group members individually. I'm using this .map method for this members array. So they might seem similar, but the biggest difference is that this .map method creates a new array, so it doesn't mutate the original array. So the next thing I want to talk about is this drag and drop functionality, which took me around 2 days to solve. I accomplished this functionality in development step 6, where you can also see the documentation. You first need to set the attribute draggable into true, and then there are 3 important functions and event listeners. The first one is on drag start, the second one is on drag over, the last one is on drop event. So the first one on drag start, I pass 2 arguments. The first one is the event, and the second one is the string of these input values here. And if we look at this on drag start function, it basically sets an ID to the element which is being dragged, and the ID is the string which we passed here. Next we have on drag over. Since by default we are not allowed to drop elements, this function here prevents the default settings of HTML, so we are allowed to drop an element. And last but not least, we have this on drop event listener, which triggers this on drop function. And here I'm passing 2 arguments. First one is the event and the second one is the string, which refers to the category the task is located in, or we want to be located in. And if we have a look at the function here, I'm targeting the ID which I set here, and in order to allow the data transfer, I say e.datatransfer.getData, and here I refer to the tasks array, and I'm using this filter method. And what this filter method does is actually returns the elements from the array which pass this test here. And what this part of the code does is actually checks whether the ID we are getting from here equals to the content of the element. Remember, we set the ID of an element to be its content, so it will be unique in every way. So this part makes sure that we are dropping the element that we targeted. And so here it sets the category of an element to the area which is being dropped. And remember, the cat here is the category which we passed here. So the last functionality is being able to delete items dynamically. So I have this button here, which has onClick event listener, which executes this function here. And here I'm passing the index position of an element in the array. And if we look at the function here, first I target the tasks array, and then I'm using splice method, which takes 2 arguments. Splice is basically remove from an array. It takes 2 arguments, the index element which we start removing the elements, and the number of elements it should remove. And in my case, I just want only 1 element to be removed, and this here updates the tasks array. So the second way of removing elements is just drag and drop into the trash bin and just hide them from the view. You can see here how I'm rendering tasks in board.complete, but here I'm not rendering anything, so it's just empty. So technically I'm just hiding them from view.